Thank you to all the amazing listeners out there. On behalf of the Reef Podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future mentions and new episodes. Have a great day.
Welcome everybody to a special edition of the Reef Podcast. I'm your
still muted.
host. No. Let's see. All right. Welcome everybody. Sorry about that. That was, of course, things like this happen. I'm so sorry about that. My name is Luis. I'm the host of the Reef Podcast, joined right here by the good old man Kratos, good old man Emperor right here with the Q&A. And please give a grand big applause, Mr. Reddick right here. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you all?
Doing really, really good. So thankful, very thankful to have you here. I mean,
I'm grateful to be here. Like, again, just the support that you all have shown this franchise, Final Destination in particular, and just, all the stuff that we've done. And yeah, it means the world. It means the world. So thank you.
That's awesome. And for those people that don't know who you are you okay with doing a quick little introduction of who you are and what you worked on?
Yes. Hi, my name is Jeffrey Reddick. Best known as the creator of the Final Destination film franchise, but I've worked on a bunch of other horror films, Tamara, Day of the Dead, The Call, The Final Wish. I've done some writing and television for kids' cartoons, so it's not been all about killing adults. We've done some spooky stuff for kids as well. And I worked on a couple of network shows, Midnight Texas, which was a lot of fun to do. And yeah, just horror is my genre, my jam. But, writing, directing, producing recently has been a major focus of mine because there's so many great projects out there that are really hard to get off the ground, and so I'm working on getting my own stuff going, but really want to help other people get their good scripts and shows on the air and on screens where they should be seen.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I started watching the franchise right when it came out, and I gotta tell you this right now, it's just inspiring, how you made the enemy of this whole franchise be something that you can't even see. Most of the other franchises out there, they have Freddy Krueger, they have Jason Voorhees, they have all this stuff. But Death, you can't see it. It's not a visible thing.
Well, and the funny thing, that was actually a battle that we had to have with the studio from the beginning. Like when I first brought the idea to them, when I worked with Craig Perry and Warren Zide, the producers at the time on the project, we didn't want to show Death because, initially, and this has been a constant, I didn't want to tie Death into any kind of religious or cultural background because death, whether you believe in the afterlife or not, is something that we all know is going to happen. So I wanted to make sure that we never rooted it in any kind of cultural or religious kind of belief system because I wanted it to appeal to as many people as possible. But the argument that we kept getting back from New Line is, but you can't see it. How can you fight something you can't see? And so Craig and I went back with the studios forever on that, and finally, kind of as a relenting to make them pick the project up, I added this Angel of Death character into the script. It wasn't killing them. Death was using their survivor's guilt to kill them, but it did kind of show up about halfway through the script as this dark, nebulous, kind of shadowy figure that was taunting Alex. And, so we were kind of going ahead with that. And then James Wong and Lynn Morgan, who had worked on some amazing TV stuff at the time, were brought on to write the shooting script. And thank God they also they just made sure that we did not show Death. I mean, you could see some remnants of the shadowy stuff in there, but I know the studio they still were kind of nervous and kind of wanted more. And James and Glenn were very masterful about not showing that. And also coming up with this Rube Goldberg idea that really played on the idea of death being all around us and can use everyday objects to get us. So I give them so much credit for taking, the concept and the story and really finding a way to make it even more universal and more terrifying. So, it takes a lot of people to make a movie. So there's so many great people along the way that have helped kind of keep this whole franchise on its track. So
That's awesome, man. I mean, when you actually have something that you're actually passionate about and you're actually enjoying yourself, that's when you actually are succeeding in life and you're actually leaving something behind that you're gonna be like, hey, I'm always gonna be remembered for this. And that's what you did. I mean,
yeah,
you basically left a legacy with all the first and second movie that you made. I mean, you basically planted a whole legacy, and now we're actually at Bloodlines, which is the new one coming out on May 16th. Which, did you had any influence by any chance with that, or?
I didn't have any influence. I did speak to the writers before they started, and I know they also spoke to James Wong and Glenn Morgan before they started as well. And the great thing about it, and I'll say that I think this is what really sets this franchise apart from a lot of other franchises, is we've had consistency with our key producers, Craig Perry and his partner Sheila at Practical Pictures, have been with me since the beginning, before, when this was just a speck of an idea for a TV show. And they have really fought to maintain the integrity of the film franchise. They are the kindest, most generous producers you'll ever meet. I'm always in touch with them, and they have like binders and notebooks, and they have every connection that every movie has, and just every idea. So they're like an encyclopedia of Final Destination, probably on par with any fans. And also the people that took a chance on the franchise at the beginning, at New Line, like Bob Shea, Mike DeLuca, Richard Brenner, Brian Witten, Chris Bender, who used to work with me, who took the project to them. They were there at the beginning, and Richard Brenner is still there on the studio side, and Mike DeLuca is back at Warner Brothers. So we've had this wonderful consistency, and then all the filmmakers involved have been fans of franchise. Like, they love the franchise. These aren't people who are like, oh, I hear there's going to be a new Final Destination, let me figure out a way to get involved. I mean, everybody involved like really grew up on the franchise, which makes me feel old. But they love the franchise, and that love, I think, really comes across in the care that goes into all the films, and I think especially in this new film, it takes it to a whole new level. As far as, I'm not going to spoil film, but just the way into the story. This is definitely a Final Destination movie, but it doesn't feel like, hey, they just took the formula and just redid it with a few twists to it. Like, there was so much care put into this, into making it something that people who've waited 15 years will go in and be like, okay, this is worth the wait. And it's a great way into the story. It's funny. It's dark. It's got one of the most terrific scenes that I've seen in the franchise. Like, I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, this is oh, it's gonna keep going, huh? Like, it's okay. Like, all right, I'm covering my eyes now. And most importantly, a Final Destination film is not a Final Destination film without Tony Todd. And just the whole Final Destination family, we're so blessed to get him back to be in this film. It was his final performance, and we knew we needed to have him back, and we were so fortunate to get him back. And it's such a fitting tribute to him. And when fans see the film, they'll understand, like, this was such a fitting. It's just a wonderful tribute to him, and it's a true blessing have someone like him, be a part of this legacy, because he's not only an icon, but he was a friend, and everybody who met him loved him, and we miss him dearly. So.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely left a huge, legacy, like you said. I mean, I personally like watched him not only on the Final Destination movies but Candyman as well.
Oh,
And man,
yeah.
just I mean the guy was so humble. Like from what I saw, like from YouTube videos of him doing meet and greets with people, just so laid back, so like down to earth, caring about everybody that came hang out with him. Like just amazing.
Yes.
And he didn't get the recognition he deserved, but I mean, in my opinion, and everybody that's actually listening to this podcast, we all know that he deserved that recognition for everything that he did.
Yeah. Like, I mean, he will always be an icon in the genre. And you're absolutely right. Like that, his humbleness and his gratitude for being able to make a living at doing what he loves is something that showed through in his work. He loved his fans. When he talked to you or talked to his fans, you felt like he was listening, and he was. It wasn't like, here, sign my get out of. There's somebody in line behind you. Like he never rushed you. He really took the time to make that connection, and I think that's what made him such a special person. And he also was he took his craft so seriously. Like he never, no matter how big or small the role was, no matter what kind of film, if it was a comedy or if it was sci-fi, he took his work very seriously. Like he never phoned it in. And I think that comes from a place of, being blessed to have a long-standing career, doing something that you love. Like he just never lost that gratitude.
All right. So my first question that I have for today is, what actually made you actually go into the film industry? Like, what made you actually go into the whole arts of filming?
Growing up, I do believe that some people just have a calling in life, and it when you're younger. And just I grew up watching movies and TV, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Like I was kind of a ham in real life, but I love the fantasy world. So I remember a neighbor told me, she's like, yeah, when you were like 7, I asked you what you were going to do when you grew up, and I said I was going to be a movie star. Now, like, movie star in my head wasn't necessarily. I did want to be an actor. That was my original dream, but it was always to work in entertainment. Like, and so it was just in my gut. And I just, I fell in love with horror films. Me and my friends would watch them, and we'd read Fangoria magazine and see how they made all the special effects. And we were so fascinated by the craftsmanship of the movie. And then I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street. I know I tell this story all the time, but it's my story. But, I saw the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and the movie just blew me away. It was described as fantasy horror, and when I went in, I didn't know what to expect, and from the beginning to the end, I was just riveted. The special effects were amazing. The story was so strong. Freddy Krueger was such a terrifying villain. Nancy Thompson was the first really proactive final girl that I'd seen in horror films. I don't mean anything, I'm not dissing any other actresses. I'm just saying the role. He wrote such a strong role. So she starts investigating, questioning, going after Freddy, dragging him out of the dream world. Like everything clicked on so many levels, and it made me realize, oh wow, these films could be so much more than just killing pretty people. Which there's nothing wrong with that, but it can have layers and it can deal with other things. And that passion is what sparked me to kind of reach out to Bob Shea at New Line when I was 19. I'm this hillbilly in Kentucky, living in a trailer, and I've got the address for the studio, and I banged out a prequel idea on a typewriter on onion paper, and mailed it to New Line, and then I got it back, and they said, we don't take unsolicited material, sorry.
Oh wow.
And then I had to look up unsolicited because I was very young, and we hadn't learned that word yet. And I sent it back to him, and I was like, look, sir, I've spent $3 on your movies, so I think you can take 5 minutes to read my story. And he actually read it. And him and his assistant, Joy Mann, from the age of 14 to 19, when I was, finishing up high school and going to college in Kentucky. They stayed in touch with me. They sent me scripts, which helped me learn how to write. I think that's very important. But most of all, it gave me encouragement. And I ended up getting an acting, getting into the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for their acting program for the summer. And when I got there, New Line, Bob and Joy said, "Hey, you want to intern for the summer?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Of course." So I interned there. And then as luck would have it, I ended up, meeting a casting director and started getting like background work in TV and movies. And, being a dumb 19-year-old, I'm like, "Oh, hell, this is easy. I'm just going to quit school and stay in New York." And I did that. and I stayed in New York. And when the acting, didn't go quite according to plan, because back then it was let's just say diversity in casting was not on anybody's radar. So there was a very tiny section of roles that people of my complexion could go out for. And I realized, well, I can either give up on acting and go back home, or then I'm like, no, I never had a plan B, and I love writing. I'm at a studio, so let me just start writing stuff for myself. Mm-hmm. That was my long-term goal. But as I got older, I was still writing about killing teenagers, and unless I could get on Dawson's in the day when they let 30-year-olds play, high schoolers, I kind of aged out of that part of it.
Gotcha. All right, Nightmare, you had a question?
Yes. You talked about writing a prequel to the Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Were you ever possibly looking at writing a prequel for another horror franchise, or was that the only one?
That was the only one. Again, I great thing about this story is just because everything was coming from like a very pure place. Like, I just saw this movie and I'm like, and I'd read Fangoria enough, and I was like, I can write this prequel. Because I wasn't thinking about a sequel. I was thinking about, that's a cool story. And you're 14, so you don't think, prequels are going to be overdone someday. And I never kept a copy of it, but I can pretty much tell you it was what a 14-year-old who didn't know anything about movies would write. It's like, there was a group of cool kids at school, and this creepy janitor guy starts murdering them. And our lead lady figures out what he's doing and captures him, and then they put him on trial, and he gets away, and the parents burn him, and then he pops up in the lead character's nightmare at the end as a surprise. So it's pretty much the story that they ended up showing on Freddy's Nightmares and every other, But it was a great experience because Bob encouraged me when he wrote me back. And he sent me scripts, and he said, "You have a really good imagination, but you really need to, study the craft of screenwriting. That's the advice I would give you." And I took that advice. So I just, Joy, his assistant, who became like a godmother to me, was like, "Would you like me to send you horror scripts?" And I'm like, "Please do." And then I would send scripts in and they would have them covered. And then Joy would write me back a really positive email saying, "Well, this stuff was really great, but give me little critiques." And then when I started working for New Line, I went and found the coverage, and it was like, this script was obviously written by somebody in middle school. And I was like, I was in high school. But I'm like, but the moral of that story is, when you're starting out, especially when you're young, you always have room to grow. And if I would have been told, if I'd have been sent that coverage when I was like 15 or 16 or 17, I'd have been like, "Oh, I'm not any good at this. I can't do this." And that's why I always tell people, like, if you have a passion and a dream, you have to follow it, but you also have to put in the work to grow, because your first many, many steps out of the door aren't going to be perfect, especially if it's writing or any kind of craft like that. You'll sometimes you'll pluck that kid off the street who's just a natural actor, you know what I'm saying? But for most people, that's still a craft that you have to learn, and you get better at it. So I'm glad that she encouraged me, so that by the time I got to New Line, I was able to read that coverage and like laugh at it and go, "Wow, luckily I didn't see that 5 years ago."
Gotcha. All right. So I know it's gonna sound kind of silly, but I mean, you probably get asked this a lot when you take interviews. We know you wrote a script for the X-Files, correct? Before you went to New Line Cinema, right? So
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, what was that like the first idea before you went to New Line Cinema, or how did it work with the X-Files?
Well, what happened with the X-Files is when you wanted to get an agent, you had to write a spec script for something that was popular on television. And the reason for that is they wanted to know that you could write other people's voices that were already established. They assumed if you're a good writer, you can write your own characters, but they want to make sure you could write other characters. Mm-hmm. So the X-Files was like one of my favorite shows on TV at the time. So I used this idea. I came up with this idea. I was flying home to visit my family, and I read an article about a woman who was on a plane, and her mother called her and said, "Don't take this flight. I have a bad feeling about it." And she switched flights, and the plane that she was on it crashed. So that put the kernel of the idea in my head, but I didn't quite know what the story was for it. And when somebody offered to introduce me to a TV agent, I'm like, they said you need a spec script. I was like, oh, this would make a great setup. Somebody being on a plane and having a premonition would be a great setup for an X-Files episode. So in that spec script, I had Scully's brother Charles, who up until that point had not really been seen on screen, have the premonition. He's obviously the suspect when the people start dying. And I finished the script, and my friend Mark Kaufman, I'm very good at remembering everybody, and I always want to give everybody credit, but my friend Mark Kaufman was one of the first people to read it. He's like, dude, this is a feature. Like, do not send this, do not try to get this to the X-Files. So it never actually went to the X-Files, but it did get me an agent. And what happened right after that is my friend Chris Benders had started working for Warren Zide and Craig Perry, the producers of American Pie, which was like going to be the next big hit in Hollywood. And they had a first look deal at New Line. So I knew that I'd submitted enough scripts to New Line directly that I didn't want them to just be like, oh, here's another script from Jeffrey. And some of them had gotten good coverage, but I'm like, you know what, I want to get something made. So I went to them and sent them 3 ideas, and they liked this one, and we developed it for many months. It started off with adults, all the characters. I kind of left that over from the X-Files where all the characters were adults, and then Scream came out, and so they were like, well, what about making them teenagers? I'm like, no problem. And so we made them teenagers. And then, I just developed it a long time with Craig, and we finally got it to a point, like you said, kind of get with the give of putting that Angel of Death in there. They bought the treatment and hired me to write the first draft of the script, which was very Nightmare on Elm Street. I have talked about this before, but it was very Nightmare on Elm Street influenced, because originally, since Death wasn't able to kill them, it couldn't just come back and kill them again. So it played on their survivor's guilt and put that, really messed with their minds in these really kind of horrific scenarios where they kill themselves in ways that look like accidents, which is obviously pretty dark. That's why when James and Glenn came on board, and I worked at the studio, so they were giving me every draft of the script to read, and my notes were going back with the studio notes. But when I saw their approach being this Rube Goldberg thing, I actually was really excited about that, because I'm like, this actually opens it up to people who aren't diehard horror fans, because everybody walks around, and if everything around you can potentially cause your death, like, that just opened up the franchise in the movie to like such a wider audience. So when I read that, I thought that was genius.
That's awesome. All right, Nightmare, what you got?
So you talked about how you came up with the idea for the initial death scene on the plane.
Yeah.
Did you write out like everything that happened, or was that somebody else?
Well, for my draft, I wrote it out as well. I mean, I wrote out everything that happened, with the bad feeling and but it played out a little differently than the version that James and Glenn shot. I think an element that James and Glenn added that was cool is they had a lot more like little things, like the knob of the chair and the John Denver song and things like that. Like, in my version, Alex, was heading to the airport. He was starting to feel queasy. He was noticing some weird stuff going on around him. Yeah, it was shot differently, which again happens when you write stuff or somebody else, writes a draft and our directors come in with how they want to shoot something. But yeah, like in my version, like he goes into the bathroom because the plane starts shaking, and when he comes out, like it's almost from the point of view like the plane is spinning, but I went with the plane like smashing, head first in the ground. So he's in the plane, everything's spinning, and all of a sudden it starts crunching up from the front and fire explodes, and then it rushes over him. Then he snaps up in the seat and he's like, we got to get off this plane, and he ends up causing a ruckus and dragging people off the plane with him. So
I think what really made me laugh about that movie was when Alex was in the bathroom with his I think it was Todd, right, his best friend, and and you hear Rocky Mountain High. I was like, oh my gosh, like like signs like that was like, I mean, even in real life, in our actual real life, sometimes you see signs like that. You're like, wait a minute, this is actually kind of odd. Why did I feel this?
Yeah, and that was, sign stuff, like, because I'm definitely a believer in kind of keeping yourself open to, like, I know that I've always been taken care of, like, so there's this part of me that has never gotten to, like, a horribly place of despair, because I know at the end of the day I'm going to be okay. And so I have seen a lot of little, I call them God nods. I got that from Oprah. Stole a lot of stuff from Oprah. But I'll see stuff around me that like lets me know things are going to be like, okay, like 66 is like my lucky number. And it's weird because I grew up in Kentucky in the Bible Belt, and our area code was 606 666 8038. And I still don't know how they let the 666 number stay there. Like, it just cracks me up. But yeah, 66 has always been my lucky number, and it's weird because if I'm just in a little bit of a funk, or if I'm stressed, I'll go click on a YouTube video and there'll be 66 comments, and I'm like, chill out, Jeffrey, everything's okay. So, that's something I kind of believe, but I do think that James and Glenn, they, like with the John Denver stuff, like they took a lot of stuff from their life experiences and infused that into the movie as well.
All right, so this is actually like a personal question, but I mean not too personal, but I don't care. I grew up in a trailer. You can ask me anything. Okay, so in your opinion, which death out of all the deaths that you've seen in the Final Destination franchises you think was the most like, oh my god, that's horrible, like that's gory, like which one? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's always hard, you know what, because I have an affection for every film. Oh man, the only reason I'm pausing because I usually cheat on this, because the log truck scene is my favorite opening of ever, and that was another Kentucky inspired thing. And that had some really gory, the log going through the sheriff, but oh man, there's just been so many gory ones. I mean, I think I think a lot of our viewers agree that the log is like the most painful one to see. Yeah, that whole scene, and again, it was such it was so fun to see that idea on paper being realized so beautifully by David Ellis, who was a stunt person, and we knew,
You know, like I wrote the story along with Eric Bress and J. Mack Eager, who are two wonderful guys who did the Butterfly Effect before that, and they've done so much stuff since. But we had a discussion, like, no matter what we write, like, David is gonna, with his stunt background, is gonna come up with something way more spectacular than anything that we could put on paper. And that scene was done, like, mostly practically. Like, the logs falling off the truck had to be CGI because logs don't bounce. When they fall off the truck, they just kind of fall. So that's not very cinematic. But they did he did such a wonderful job with that whole scene. It's just, plus I intentionally wanted to set up, you know, like you thought that Kimberly and her group of friends were the main characters. So I wanted to murder them all off except for Kimberly, you know, just to, like, because, you know, we just had a teenage version of the film. So I wanted them to think, oh, we're going to be following these teens again, and then wipe 3 of them out.
Jesus Christ.
Not to be mean, to surprise audiences. None of this is mean.
Now, was the log truck your idea, or was that somebody else's idea?
No, that came to me. And again, this goes back to Craig Perry. I always talk about him because he always pushes, which is great. Like, I know when you know, we worked on the first story, we were all really happy with it, but Craig said, I feel like there needs to be something. There needs to be an extra twist somewhere in the script that takes the story to the next level. And I was sitting at home one night, and that's when I came up with the idea that death was killing them in the order that they would have died in the plane crash. Like, that's when I came up with Death's Design. And what that did was that gave Alex a chance and hope that they could figure out a way to fight back. And with the opening for the second movie, originally the kids were driving down to Florida and they were going to stay at a hotel, and the hotel was going to catch on fire. So it was going to be a hotel.
So that was the original idea.
That was the original. And then, but the more I talked to Craig, like, got to be something. I just think there can be something better, Jeff. And so once again, going home to Kentucky, I think Kentucky tourism owes me something for all the inspiration. But no, I was driving on the Mountain Parkway, and I got behind a log truck, and I pulled over, as I always do, and then I pulled off the highway, and I called Craig, and I think it was late at night too. I called Craig, out of breath. I'm like, what about if he's like, slow down, Jeffrey, I can't understand what you're saying. I was like, what about a log truck on a freeway and the chain breaks in the lot? And he goes, that's the opening. So that's why I always tell creative people, like, it's so important to kind of find time to live life, because you don't know where those inspirations come from. And it could have been they used the hotel fire in a comic book, which was kind of funny. I found all of a sudden a comic book, but the log truck, you know, that has become like
iconic,
the meme that never dies, which I love it. People.
I mean, we did notice that in the Final Destination Bloodlines trailer, there's a freaking log truck. I think that's like a little Easter egg for you.
There are still people that cannot drive behind log trucks, thanks to you. I hope you know this.
That's me. That is me.
I'm only partially kidding that I think I probably saved some lives on freeway accidents. And I don't ask for much. I mean, yes, I'd like to have a Saturn Award someday. But maybe some kind of certificate, some low-level, like, humanitarian certificate for saving lives would be nice. I don't think that's asking for much.
Good Lord. All right, what you got, Nightmare?
So, I want to go back to Alex for a minute. We never seen an actual death from Alex. You've mentioned in interviews that you would like to see Alex return. What would be your idea on how to bring him back and what role he would have in that movie?
Well, this comes from two places. I'm a lifelong horror fanatic, and I love and respect legacy characters so much from the first films. Like, I did not like how they killed off Alice in Friday the 13th Part 2. I know that there were personal things going on in her life where she, had a stalker and was afraid they had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that, like, when Nancy came back for Nightmare 3, it was like, just blew my mind. So I know legacy characters are kind of a thing now. But I like when they come back and they treat them with respect. And with Alex, he was always meant to be in the story. We just couldn't get things to work out for the sequel. And the way that he was killed off, which just honestly just irks me because I think it was a little disrespectful. It was. If you look at that scene, Clear only says, "Look what happened to Alex under my watch." She doesn't say, like, "I was there when he died" or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
For all we know, she went to the grocery store and then came back, and there's some guy laying with a brick in his head.
It's Alex.
It doesn't even look like Alex. The body doesn't even look like Devon Sawa's body.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, Devon didn't die on screen, and Kimberly and Officer Thomas never died on screen in Final Destination 2. Like, it was a DVD extra on Part 3 that said they got killed.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, and again, I'm sure the studio kind of gets tired of me going on about this, but in my mind, they're not dead, canon-wise, because we didn't see them die on screen. Mm-hmm. As for how I would want to bring them back, I don't want to get into too much, because I think, and this isn't spoiling anything, but I think Bloodlines, the way that they go into this story is so smart and kind of opens up possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
That I think, I don't want to say any of my ideas, because I think they might bump into spoilerish stuff that's really interesting in Bloodlines.
Well,
so
I was gonna say, just so you know, I have pre-ordered 10 tickets to that movie already for Thursday.
You are wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm going with 9 other friends. I'm excited.
I have no skin in this game, as far as, like, I didn't write it, I get it based on characters created by credit, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. And there is a character named after me, which is fun.
Oh, what?
Oh, that's awesome.
He's kind of a dick, but hey.
not only that, but I mean, come on, the fact that they brought that log truck again, that's gotta be like something that's like, hey, that's for the second film. I mean, that's the thing I do when I look at teaser trailers, Jeffrey. I analyze in deep, like, okay, what is going on in this trailer? And that's why when I saw that log truck, I was like, that's a nod for him. I got a feeling that's a nod for him.
Oh, you know what's funny? Well, I think it's a nod. Yeah, for the there's nods to all the films in there, and all the great filmmakers and writers and crew that worked on it. But what was I going to say? There's just a couple, like, fun facts about this movie too. Like, there's a burn. There's a scene with fire. You've obviously seen in trailers. I'm not going to spoil which one, but one person that gets, I'm just going to keep it super vague, but one person that gets burned in one of the scenes came out of retirement, and she's well, now it's a woman. She's the longest burn victim of her age. Like, she came out of retirement to do this really long ass burn scene. And so it's cool to have stuff like that, where it's like,
you hear
this woman came out of retirement, to be in a Final Destination movie and get burned.
Right.
So, and I think again, it's because the people that have always been involved, and again, these anchors include the studios, but again, especially Craig and Sheila, they're so interactive with the fans. They respect the fans, and they respect filmmakers, and so everybody that gets to meet them, and everybody that hears about Final Destination that's a filmmaker, they know that it's really a great family. You know, of people that respect the films and love them and want to work on them. We've shot most of them in Canada, so you know, there's a very special place in Canada for the films, and obviously we hold a very special place for them in our hearts, because they, you know, just allowed us to shoot such like pretty massive films down there. So yeah, it's just, this is just like, this new movie feels like a new chapter. Not in a, oh, it's rebranding. It's, you know, they're not rebooting the franchise or rebrand, or, you know, like that. It feels like a very smart, different but organic way to like bring you all what you've been waiting for.
But one thing that always intrigues me, I mean, I know I said it earlier, but you gotta love the music they pick for those trailers. Like in this new one, Without You by Air Supply, I was like, come on, like,
Oh yeah,
yeah, like, I mean, perfect song, because I love Air Supply to death. And
yeah,
like, just the fact that it says I can't live without you and everything, and then you hear, like, you know, that line from that iconic person that I'm not gonna say names either. Like, I was like, dude, this is gonna blow my mind already, just because, I mean, it's Tony Todd's last work, and this is gonna go down as, like, you know, one of my most caring and most fondable movie out of the whole franchise, just because it's the last one that he worked on. And that leads up to my next question. I know you answered it earlier, but for people that are still here, how was it being on the set with Tony Todd? Like, you know, talking with him, going over, like, you know, that the things that he had to say, like, how did the character came to be as well?
Well, you know what, I James and Glenn wrote Tony Todd's character, because in the original script there was the creepy guy that was like knew what was going on and told the kids, like, but it was because it had happened to him. So when James and Glenn wrote the shooting script, they wrote Tony Todd as this wonderfully, you know, majestic, vague, creepy person who knows a lot more about death maybe than than he should. So maybe he is death. So, you know, they wrote the character in a very smart way. So he had some answers, but there was something about him where he wasn't telling everything he knew, but he was always around death. And so whether it was a mortician or, you know,
Caretaker,
an ambulance guy, you know, working, you know, picking up bodies at crime scenes, he was always around.
I mean, when you hear that whistling, you know he's around.
Yeah. And again, like, just Tony himself, he brought just so much weight to, and gravitas and mischievous. There was also a mischievous kind of toying with the characters with the idea. Never making fun of them or being like, haha, you're dead, like, sucks to be you. But there was just always like this twinkle in his eye when he, you know, because he, you know, death's unavoidable. And, you know, and I think with this film in particular, again, it's just such a wonderful send-off. I got the pleasure of meeting Tony at a convention years and years ago, and we just really hit it off. We talked for a long, long time, just about my, you know, he asks people a lot of questions about them, which is nice. You know, I think probably everybody that talks to him knows everything about him, so he's kind of, maybe doesn't want to talk about himself, but, you know, we got to know each other very well, and I went to parties, you know, birthday parties of his, and talked to him a lot, and he, you know, really was a friend. And I remember just speaking to his professionalism. Like, he did a one-man show about the first African-American welterweight champion, and it was a 90-minute one-man show, just him, nobody else, and he kills it. He goes from, you know, younger to older, all the ranges of emotion. Everybody's like standing applause when he's done, and I went up to him and I was like, you know, almost in tears, just like, because it was such a moving performance. I was like, that was amazing, Tony. And he's like, messed up 2 lines. And I'm like, that's, you know, that's how much of a perfectionist he was, you know. And again, that's part of being a creative person. Like, you know, you critique yourself, you know, but you would think somebody his level, he would just be like eating up the applause. And he, was grateful that we were there and that we enjoyed the show. But in the first thing on his mind was like, messed up 2 lines.
Man, and just to finish up this question, if you had to actually say anything to Tony Todd, like if it was like, if you had the chance, what would you tell him?
I would thank him for breaking so much ground as a actor of color for the people who came behind him. Being Candyman. I mean, he worked before that, but obviously, Candyman was is a modern classic where you had this, African-American lead who was both desirable and dangerous and, had a tragic history, but had this huge mythology built around him. And, for the horror genre, he was one of the first. I mean, we had our Blackulas and we had our other fun characters, but, Tony, and Candyman was a myth, had this whole myth built around him. And I know the movie version differed from the Clive Barker version, but I know that Clive signed off on all the changes that were made to make it American. And it was such a wonderful movie. Everybody in that, Virginia Madsen, Xander Berkeley, Casey Lemons, Bernard Rose, the director, the score, everything was like wonderful about that movie. And I think that role really kind of set a high bar, and broke ground for like having African American villain, hero, anti-heroes, whatever, tragic figures. He just broke ground for people to follow behind him. So I would thank him for that.
That's awesome. All right, Nightmare, what you got?
I think I've got one more question before we get into the Q&A.
Okay.
We've talked a lot on Final Destination, but you have other stuff coming up as well. Yeah. What is the one thing that you've worked on that still is yet to come out that you're looking forward to everybody seeing?
Okay, now you put me in a pickle because the people whose films are about to come out, I'm supposed to talk about their stuff, and they're going to get. No, I will say the project that I'm most excited about is my most recent one. I can't really talk about it yet because we're packaging it right now, but it's important to me because of the theme of the story, and the theme is that people fear or hate others, whether it's racism, homophobia, sexism, religious prejudice, because they don't want to deal with the trauma or issues going on in their own lives, so they project their grievances onto other people. And that's the theme of the film, and I don't want to get too much into the plot of it. I know it sounds like, a kind of hoity-toity theme, but it's really one of the scariest and darkest films that I've written. Not in a way that's like mean-spirited, like, murder people, but in a way that is scary because it really asks us to look at like what's going on in our lives. And can we face that so that we can hopefully be better people? But it's really dark and it's very personal, and it took me a long time to write it because I love writing fun, like roller coaster popcorn horror films with some universal themes to them and depth to them. But this was one where I had to kind of dig into a lot of the pain that I've had in my life, and a lot of the, as a gay person of color, a lot of the issues that I've had to deal with and thought were gone and I see coming back, and so I've always tried to be very optimistic in how I view the world and how I treat people and how I navigate these sensitive issues, and not ever let the anger take over. And I decided, at least in this script, I was going to tap into that angry side, but still balance it out with hope, and really some of the most messed up death scenes you'll ever see come out of the Jeffrey Reddick library. So that project is the one that I'm so excited about.
So we're gonna get an announcement very soon then.
We're attaching people now. There's a couple others, if I may. I produced a film called The Others that is coming out through Quiver on June 13th. Very excited about that. My friend Paul Etheridge directed that one, and it's a really fun movie about a girl who gets adopted into a family, and something is after her and tracking her and brings evil to this home, and you don't know if it's her or not. And then I did a really fun horror film with Felissa Rose and Dave Sheridan in Kentucky, my home state, with these two directors, PJ Stark and Eric Hetcherson, who I admire so much. And it's a kind of a Porky. I shouldn't say Porky's, but it's got the humor of Porky's, but with the gore of like Terrifier. So it's just a really fun film. And so that one we'll be announcing a distributor on that one very soon as well. So yeah. And then there's a project I'm working on that's going to be announced at Cannes as well.
That's awesome.
But the one that I just finished, as far as like I know I broke the rules and snuck all that other stuff in there, but the one that is the closest to my heart is the one that I feel I need to tell, and I feel the world. It's a message that the world needs to hear, but not in a preachy kind of way. It's more of like, because I have my own stuff, I have my own stuff that when I don't want to deal with it, I lash out at other people. And it's like, I think it's part of our human nature to do that. So it allowed me to kind of get some of that out in a very dark, scary way.
All right. So, Emperor, you had a couple of questions to ask Mr. Reddick here, right?
Yes, I did. So this one comes from a quirky gamer. Were you able to take home any pieces from the set or any of the early Final Destination movies?
I did. The funny thing is, I got a crew jacket that I gave to my sister. I have another fun gift.
Oh my gosh!
It's a melted black box from Final Destination.
And then we see the little Freddy on the left.
You see Freddy on the left. And what was really cool too is when New Line, at the end of the year, Bob Shea would pick a movie that really meant something to the studio and make gifts, like a gift for the whole company. Mm-hmm. And he made gave everybody at the studio a little.
Oh wow! Wow, that's actually really awesome.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, most of the crew stuff, I get crew stuff, then I give it to my sister. I need to get two. Need to get two of everything, but if I don't, she'll kick my butt. So,
well, we're letting you know right now in the podcast. We're actually gonna get you a T-shirt that we're gonna send to you, so that way you can actually have with you. Because this is
thank you.
Because from what we saw is that apparently this is actually your first Twitch interview, right? You never had a
yes. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I am pretty sure. I am 90% sure. I am 99% sure this is my first Twitch interview.
That's awesome. All right, so Emperor, I know you answered a question that a viewer had, but you had 3 questions with you that you had, you personally. So you want to ask those questions?
Yes. What decided you to traumatize a whole generation?
Well, when you're writing, especially horror, I've always viewed horror because I know when I was growing up, where we lived, people would always think horror movies were evil and all this stuff. But what I found is most of the horror fans that I met were people who are really wonderful. Like every horror writer and director and actor that I know, 99.9% of them are just amazing people. We didn't maybe feel like they quite fit in perfectly where they grew up. They felt like a little bit of an outcast. And I think that horror movies like help people kind of get those negative emotions out in a safe space, in a safe way. And so I read Fangoria, I saw how they used to make movies. And so when I come up with like horror movies, I come up with like a story that I think is going to be universal. And then what I honestly try to do is try to think of ways to kill people that I haven't seen a lot, or at least put a twist on it, because there's so many movies out there. It's really hard to come up with a way to kill people that hasn't been done before. So for me, it's more of a creative, like, what can I do that we haven't seen before, or that's people are expect it's going to go this way and then take it that way. So it's never about traumatizing, but it is maybe about building suspense too, in a way. Like there's a scene in this movie, in a movie I wrote called Tamra. It's kind of my homage to Carrie, and there's a scene where these kids bully this girl. They accidentally kill her. They don't realize she's into witchcraft, and they bury her in the woods, which of course, is the first thing you do when you're a smart teenager in a horror movie. And she comes into class Monday looking smoking hot, alive, and then she starts going after the bullies by digging into their deepest fears. And, the kids can't go to the police and say, hey, we killed her on Friday and she's murdering us. But there's one scene where one of the kids feels guilty because he didn't do anything. And he says, he breaks some glass, and then he says, I'm not going to live my life by, the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, which we all know. Mm-hmm. So when he says hear no evil, he cuts off his ear.
Oh, my Lord.
Which is gruesome. But it also sets up, what the other two words are.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what he's going to do.
Oh,
so it's not just the first act, but it's like the anticipation of like, oh, no, you still got the speaking in the sand, So, a lot of it's just trying to have fun with the build-ups to the kills, not just traumatizing people with like a shocking image.
All right. What's your next question, Emperor?
Yes. If you could work with another iconic killer actor, who would it be?
That is really putting me on the spot. No, it's actually the funny thing is I've got to work with a lot of the horror icons. Like I've worked with Tony Todd and Lynn Shay and Tobin Bell, and and I've met so many other ones. But are you talking about like iconic actor or actress in general?
We could do that too. We could do that too if you like to.
Or no, if you ask for horror, I'll stick with horror. I forget.
Okay, yeah, horror.
Horror. I have not. Well, you know what? I have not got to work with Robert Englund.
Ooh.
And I've met all the Nightmare people, and I've met all of them, and they're wonderful, and I adore Heather Langenkamp too. Like I'd love to work with her too. But I've literally met all the Nightmare people in person, and they're all wonderful. But I never got to work with Robert Englund.
Wow, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, I will tell you, and I will tell you, and this isn't a horror icon, but it's funny because Nightmare on Elm Street's like my movie, like holy grail from growing up, and I don't know if you all are old enough to remember the original V miniseries from the 80s. That's like my TV like holy grail.
I gotcha.
And Mark Singer was the hero of the show. Faye Grant was the heroine, and then Jane Badler was like the main villainess, and she was up there with Freddy Krueger in my mind, with Robert Englund, like up for TV. And I got to work with her. I did a short called Good Samaritan, and I just reached out to her. She lived in Australia, And I just sent her an email. I'm like, I would love for you to do a small part in my film, my short film. And she got back to me, and we became friends, and she's the loveliest lady in the world. And I had to have a crew in Australia like shoot her one line, but you would think, you know, she's Jane Badler, you know, she's doing me a favor. You'd think she would just like do maybe 2 takes, you know, in one area. Like, she changed outfits, she went to different locations just to give this one line, and I'm like, you are fucking amazing. So I just had to throw her name in there too, because, you know, it's part of this is the young fan geek meeting people that you grew up just like idolizing.
Gotcha.
I'd like to work with her too. Well, I did work with her, but in a more murdery way, not a cameo way.
All right. So the last question we have here before we get to the remaining Q&A is, okay, you mentioned earlier how Kimberly and Officer Burke never got killed on screen. Only on that third Final Destination, what if this happened? Or whatever. Like, it was like a...
It's a DVD extra. It was DVD extras. Like if you watch...
Wasn't it Choose Your Fate or something? And then...
I don't know. I don't know if it's... to be honest, I didn't play the Choose Your Fate game.
I did that because I got the special edition of that one, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I get to choose the fate." That's crazy.
But I thought it was a new. Like, there was a newspaper clipping.
Yeah. So basically, when you did choose your fate, you had to choose whether the train went left or right at the end. And when you did that, if you choose a certain path out of the two, it actually showed the rat. But before the rat, it showed a newspaper fly by the rat, and the newspaper had Kimberly and Officer Burke die by like her hair getting entangled in some kind of saw machine or something, and
And come on.
Yeah. I was
yeah.
like,
Nobody. Yeah. Those don't count.
Yeah. I mean, whenever Tony Todd mentioned, like, on the second movie, like, you know, a new life cheats death, I was like, okay, well, I mean, they basically beat it. I mean, there's no way. I mean, we don't know. So, I mean, we hope. I mean, this is actually another little question too. Is we hope eventually Final Destination doesn't just become movies, but we hope there's a series eventually to show, like, you know, some closed bridges, you know, like to close some bridges that were never closed.
Yeah, no, there's always been discussions about that, like, you know, the you know, we've certainly networks and people have approached the studio about doing, you know, TV shows and things like that, but they've been very protective of this franchise. I mean, I say not milk it in a crass way. Like, I don't want it to be like where we're having like crappy versions of it coming out at all. But, you know, I think there are ways to tell the story. You know, tell the stories in different mediums. You know, I know there was a book series, and there were some comic books, but I think absolutely you could do a really cool, you know, TV series as well. But you know, you also want to make sure that it's done well. You want to make it smart and not some cash grab. So,
I mean, you don't want to do like Chucky. I mean, Chucky had a series, and
I gotta say I loved the Chucky series though.
The only thing I liked was how old he looked. I was like, my lord, they made that doll look old.
Oh yeah, no, I love that series. I thought it was just so fun, and I loved how they brought Devon Sawa in, and he would play a different character every year, and they murdered him. And it just kind of stayed true to the mythology, but just like took it in a whole bunch of different directions. So, but yeah, I know he's working on a movie now that I think is going to still be in universe with the series.
Interesting.
Been set up in the series. So
if I remember correctly, the ending of the Chucky series, I mean, spoiler alert, I mean, in case if everyone watches it, I saw apparently some kind of like nuclear device or something, like he literally pressed a button or something. I think it was something like that. I don't remember. It was something weird that he did that basically, like, you know, and basically I think he dies at the end of the series. I'm not sure exactly how it was.
That's not I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, I don't think that's what happened.
No,
I don't think that's what it was either.
Okay.
But I'm not going to spoil. But I'm
Okay.
not going to spoil it.
Okay, because I mean, I saw a video like that online. I mean, you know, you never can tell what's real or not anymore when you see those videos
Yeah.
online. So
No, not at all.
yeah. But anyways, okay. So Emperor, you had a couple of Q&A questions accumulated, correct?
Yes, I do. This is
I'm
from
glad you
Voltman
said
the
yes. Sorry, you're a no questions at all.
No.
Yeah, no, sorry,
we had,
negative.
We had a couple.
From the Ropeman the Great asked, did you ask Tony Todd about his time on Star Trek?
No. When we talked, like I said, it was either at conventions or personal. You know, when we were hanging out personally. So we didn't tend to talk about work. Yeah, we talked about just life stuff. Yeah. So no, I didn't really get a chance to speak to Medane about any of that stuff, because once we kind of got into the friend zone, it was just like, what's going on in your life? What's going on in your life? And you know.
And
Yeah.
you don't want to talk about work, basically. You just want to talk about how.
You don't want to
Yeah.
talk about. You know,
Yeah.
All right.
the only work we talk about is like, I want to work with you again, and I'm like, I want to work with you again. But yeah.
All right. What's the next one, Emperor? I'm sorry.
This one's from Crazy Mom. Do you avoid logging trucks like in traffic like the rest of us? Since rain.
Yeah. I still like that's the thing is, yeah, me getting away from one is why I did it. I will say I've started, as I've gotten older, I've started getting a little cocky. If I get behind a truck, and I've done this a couple times, and I got to quit because my friends say it's not funny, but I'll just take a video going, hey, if anything flies off this truck and kills me, the studio can use this for marketing material. And then just, so, you know, I don't know. I you know, I do anything for art, and but my friends are like, that is not funny, stop it. So
All right. What else you got, Emperor?
I don't have anything else right now, but I wanted to tell you this, that May the 16th actually my birthday, and I'm going to see it.
oh wow.
Yep.
Well, happy birthday. I'm again, it's coming from my heart. I really think you will, if you're a Final Destination fan and a Tony Todd fan, you are going to have a very happy birthday when you see this film. There was so much, again, I can't express how much thought and care and love from everybody, from the cast, crew, everybody was put into this film. Like, there was no half-assing it on this film. So you're gonna have a good birthday. If you don't, you can email me and I will send you a birthday card.
All right, so we got a question here from ESPNU Dexter. He says, name your least favorite movie you had a hand in creating.
Well, I know you're probably thinking I'm going to say Day of the Dead. I'm kidding. Any fans that know me know that when I signed on to do that movie, it was going to get made. Steve Miner was attached to direct. I was very excited. They signed off on a version that was very faithful to the original. And then as I started writing it, they started making me change it more and more and more and more. So like early reviews were like, or early interviews, you would hear me going, oh yeah, the fans are going to be excited about this movie. And then as I would do later reviews, I was like, it's a movie. So it kind of changed a lot. But I will be honest, worst experience, and this is just business, so this isn't any shade on anybody that I worked with, but I was hired to write a sequel to this movie called Return to Cabin by the Lake. And it had Judd Nelson in it, and it was a USA movie, and I watched it. I really enjoyed it. They hired me to write a sequel, and I put a lot of hard work into it because I knew we wanted to get Judd Nelson back, so I'm like, well, I need to make sure he's got like I need to do. So the first movie was about a guy who, to get inspired, he's a horror writer. To get inspired, he actually murders these women and buries their bodies in this lake. And so for the sequel, and this was actually before Scream, I'm pretty sure, the sequel was about them making a movie about his crimes, and he was still alive, and he ends up worming his way onto set. And so it was kind of a meta horror movie, but it was I wanted to like not have it be cheesy, so I wanted to avoid all the generic tropes, like, the director was like dating the lead actress, but other actresses were throwing themselves at him trying to get more screen time, and he's like very committed to it. So I wanted to like turn all the Hollywood tropes on their heads, and it was really scary. And so they got the director back, they got Judd Nelson back, and then probably a month before shooting, I get a call from the producer, and she's like, I got some bad news. And I'm like, oh no, did Judd Nelson and the director quit? She goes, no, they're contractually obligated to do the movie. But she goes, the head of the network reread the script on the plane and said he thought it was too clever for the USA Network audience. So he had one of his friends come in and just dumb the script down. This is like exactly the conversation. And I'm like, how dumb? And she goes, I said, can you send it to me? She goes, no, I can't send it to you. So when you watch the movie now, I try to find something to enjoy about every movie. But first movie was like serious, creepy horror with some comedy in it. And I feel like when the director and Judd saw the rewritten script, they were like, screw it, we're just going to make this like a screwball comedy. So that was painful to watch because I watched it with my friends because the producer was like, I can't send it to you. Like I can barely watch it myself. So I remember I was like watching it, and it was like that old commercial when the people were littering and they would cut to the ending with the tear going down his eye. Like that was me watching that movie. Because I was like, wow, because they just stripped it down to like just dumb. They really dumbed it down, and it's not like the original script was like Shakespeare, but any nuance with characters was gone. The director's like banging all the actresses and doing just everything that I was trying to avoid. That was a stereotype. Like they just put it in there. So that was my worst. That was my worst watching a movie experience. Yeah. I've had like, I will say in my career, I've been very blessed in that almost every film that I've worked on, even I was on set for that film and I got to meet the director and Judd Nelson, and we all hit it off. Like, and I met the cast and we had a great time. It's just the finished film didn't work out.
Right.
Turned out like any of us had wanted. But on almost every film I've worked on, I've been on set. I've met the directors and the writers and the cast, and I'm friends with most of them to this day. Like in this industry, I talked to so many people where they've had like 7 or 8 or 9 bad experiences out of 10. And I would say, I've only had like 1 bad experience, that involved like just some fragile ego stuff. But I've been very fortunate in that, the directors that, and writers and actors that I've worked with over the years, like most of them are friends of mine, and we've stayed friends, and I support their work and they support mine. And it's been a very wonderful, wonderful life for me. I'm saying this like I'm like, this is the end of my life. I don't mean it like that. I've been very, very fortunate.
That's awesome. And final question we have is from Rope Man. He's saying, what is your favorite bourbon?
Well, is Jack Daniel's bourbon or whiskey?
That's actually a good question.
Ooh, whiskey for Jack Daniels?
The only reason I'm sober. I quit drinking like 16 years ago. So, what Kentucky bourbon? I know I tried bourbon back in the day, but I forget what my favorite one was. But then I turned into a vodka vodka drinker, and then during the sad part before I got sober, I was just a red wine drinker because I thought red wine was healthy for me because I had Restaval. So I figured, if I drink a couple bottles of this, it's good for me. So it's been so long since I've drank that I can't remember what the bourbon was.
Mm-hmm.
What the bourbon was. I know there's Kentucky bourbon.
Was it Jim Beam?
Jim Beam, thank you. Yes, that was it.
I drink on occasion.
That was the one that I tried, and I did like it, and I had moonshine, like I'm talking like old school moonshine that they made in a radiator, not that fancy kinds you get from like clean machines that may not poison you. Like, when I say I grew up a hillbilly, like, yeah, we had cousins that made moonshine out of radiators. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So, any last comments that you have for the interview and everything? Like, do you know that you can actually give us feedback or anything like that? We always take feedback here. So, I mean, if you have any comments or if you want to shout out anybody, now's the time that you can shout out somebody.
No, I mean, I don't have any feedback for you guys. This was great. Keep doing what you're doing. I can only see half of his head.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah, he's actually on his phone.
Yeah, my laptop tried to break, so I had to go buy me a new one tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh no, I have to use my laptop because my iPhone will not stay in an iPhone holder, so that's why I always have to, so that would be my only note is let's see your whole face.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be funny too,
and also just letting you know, this episode that we did with you actually marks our 50th episode that we done on our podcast.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Milestone.
Big milestone indeed. Definitely. Because
yeah.
We're trying to reach 100, but I mean, that's going to happen in a few. And we've been very dedicated here to actually bring over here. I mean, I've been going through a couple of co-hosts before, but this guy right here has been the GOAT so far for being here.
Awesome.
he actually had he was a little sick. And he's like, Louis, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I was like, dude, if you can't make it, don't worry. I mean, we'll make it work. But hey, he's the one that basically decided to come over here. But I want to also personally thank Spot'em Gang Network, because if it wasn't for them, we would actually not be live on Twitter right now on their actual Twitter handle. So shout out to Spot'em Gang for
absolutely
for definitely having us this opportunity to have us here. But so I mean, this actually yes sir. Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say the only thing, and again, I always say this, but I always mean it. I just want to send a shout out to the fans, genre fans who support all horror films, especially in theaters. You all are the reasons that we have careers and original films coming out. And I want to shout out to all the young people who dream of working in any kind of arts, whether it's painting, singing, dancing. We don't encourage that, in our schools. When growing up, we don't encourage kids to pursue arts. When I think the arts can actually cure a lot of societal ills. I think they can create communities. They can help kids express things that they don't know how to express verbally, build communities, move hearts and minds. So to all the artists and teachers out there, I definitely want to give a shout out to you all. And just shameless plug, if you want to follow me, on social media, my handle is Jeffrey A. Reddick. It's funny because my last name is spelled Reddick, but when I try to type that into Discourse, it took out the ICK and changed it to YCK. And I've seen some programs do that. I think it's maybe a safety feature where they think I'm trying to be dirty, but I'm like, that's just my name. But
for me personally, I play, I don't know if you heard of Call of Duty, but
yes,
literally my name on Twitter, you seen it as LuisIpa. And apparently Call of Duty take the defensive because IPA is like the drink. So they're like, hey, you can't use this name. You can't use IPAs because like the IPALs. So it's kind of funny, like, you know, that they basically are like this. I'm like, this is an 18 and up game. How do you want me to, like, you know, how are you not allowing me to have this? I mean, I'm basically over 18 and over here. There should be an issue with this.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all this stuff that's coming out or that I'm announcing, you know, I post on social media, but I also, if I see friends, not even friends, if I see movies that I don't know the people, you know, if I see a good horror movie or a good indie film that I love, I'm always like, check this out. So yeah, feel free to follow.
That's actually one type of companies that I always praise, the indie companies, the small little companies. They always work their butt off to like literally try to get like, you know, where the AAA movies are or AAA games. And shout out to them because they have such a small, like, you know, staff that they still make it work. I mean, I had a couple of indie game developers been interviewed here, and you have no idea how happy they are when we talk to them. We promote their games and get to play their games, and they're like super happy. And of course, like, you know, eventually I would like to get into indie movie makers so that way we can promote them as well.
Yeah. Well, it's a good start, and you're on episode 50, so
definitely. But
I think you have a great going forward.
Thank you so much. So we're gonna actually close out with the episode we're gonna do our closing cutscene that we have, like, you know, our little scene, and then after that, so all the spotters that are actually here watching like the video on Twitter and Twitch, please do not go away because we have a little cutscene that will play. It's not a cutscene, but it's like a little homage to somebody. I'm not gonna say names, but I hope you guys stay through the credits. It's only gonna be a 45-second outro, and then after that outro it's gonna play a 10-second little clip, and then after that we'll wrap up the show. So thank you again, Mr. Reddick, for the great opportunity. It's been an honor.
Thank you all for having me. Now it's been a pleasure.
I hope we're able to talk again, and like I'll definitely keep in touch with you about getting like the shirt that I promised you. So I'll definitely and then since you live in Cali, I'll definitely let you know when I'm around that area, so that we can probably go have a coffee or a drink or something.
Absolutely.
All right. So on behalf of the podcast here, I'm LuisIpa. That's NightmareRyzing right here, Emperor here, and of course, you know, the man, the legend, Mr. Reddick himself.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
You guys have a good night, and we'll see you next week. As always, today's episode of the Reef Podcast was streamed live on Twitch. If you could not make it to the live stream of the podcast, you can always listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and iHeart Radio. Thanks for listening. See you next time.